So, Anna, you're at the opposite end of the spectrum from some of our software and AI geeks that we've invited to this sessions this couple of days. Your company digs stuff out of the ground, and in more or less the ways, although much more modern technology applied, that we've done forever, right? Essential metals, minerals for the modern economy. What is your connection to AI?
Look, so I think that, as you said, there's been a lot of talk about the use of AI, the use of the product for good, for bad, responsible, irresponsible. The way that we look at it is it's an infrastructure story. AI, good, bad, ugly, whatever, is impossible without physical infrastructure, without power, without grid connections, without the data center infrastructure. And that infrastructure story, in our view, relies fundamentally on metals availability. And those are the metals that we supply: the copper, the nickel, the cobalt, the lithium. Today, you cannot build and operate data centers without those, perhaps, and we've had this conversation, perhaps in the future, scarcity will drive innovation. But in the world that we have today, that's the reality that we find. And so for us, this is an infrastructure story, and it's a security of supply story, because the exponential growth or the rapid growth or wherever you are on the spectrum of your optimism about AI still suggests an increase in demand for those metals. So it's an infrastructure story, it's a security of supply story. And for us, it's also a sustainability story. There's this false dichotomy that I hear that I find really frustrating. Security of supply, Trump sustainability, just cut the corners, go fast, go loose. We need those metals today, no matter the cost. In the world of mining, that is fundamentally untrue. You cannot deliver security of supply, you cannot deliver resilient value chains without them being sustainable. Whether it's because the regulation requires it, and that's transatlantic, we have forced labor regulations, we have due diligence obligations that we all must meet for our products to be eligible to the market, or whether it's from a risk management perspective, because as any of my colleagues from the industry will attest, we spend a huge amount of our time looking at the environmental and social impacts of our operations at whatever stage of the life cycle, making sure that those are understood and managed so as to ensure the continued ability to operate without community protests, without environmental incidents, without any catastrophe.
But these are issues you've grappled with for a long time. And even obviously you're a Western mining company, but there are those the Chinese or Chinese funded that may not adhere to the same norms, or they may be privately held, not subject to capital markets pressure or boycotts, or they may serve markets that don't have the standards, let's say, in Europe. And so it's not that mining is inherently sustainable. What I'm hearing from you is that the reality of being a public-facing company with the prominence of you or your peers, that sustainability has to be something you take on board, or else you don't have the license to do business in the West, is what I'm understanding. Am I right?
Agreed, with a caveat.
Yeah.
I think actually two caveats, if I may. One, I think we see a broad spectrum of practice no matter the nationality of the company. We see amazing practices, we see terrible practices, and that can happen. Private, US, public, European, Chinese, practice knows no nationality. So that's just one caveat. I think the second one is, and it's sort of, I'm going to contradict what I was planning to say, but I'll just go with it. We do, despite the sort of the news coverage, but we do today have integrated supply chains. There may be more fragmented than they have been, but nevertheless, product that originates in Congo may go to China, but it will ultimately end up in Europe. And so that regulation and those customer expectations do still cascade all the way to the point of origin. And we see that in our own operations, but you can say, yeah, but you're a Western company, of course you would. But we also see that with our suppliers who are saying, we want to be able to access premium, Western, whatever you want to call them, markets. And so we need to operate to a standard that is acceptable to those markets. So I won't generalize and I won't say this is universal. Again, we see a range of practice, but I do see that cascading of expectations trickle all the way to the upstream.
Okay. Well, many of you would have noticed this is obviously a hot topic. The cover story in The Economist that was published last Friday was about commodities. In fact, I had the opportunity to work with colleagues on 4 continents to write our cover package on, in particular, looking at the role of the U.S. administration. You had mentioned China in passing. Of course, the U.S. is quite concerned about China's grip on critical minerals and the processing of them, which is really where the linchpin of control is. Rare earths are not all that rare, as we know, but actually processing them takes a lot of capital. It can be environmentally very dirty, and ultimately is a long-term business with very low margins. So China has made a strategic decision quite a number of years ago, decades ago, to pursue that to its advantage. And now the U.S. is stepping in a very large way with an all-of-government effort, whether it's on trade, creating trading blocks on minerals, economic instruments like price floors, taking stakes directly in companies. They've done that already in a few examples, or investing in companies in Africa to go and find mines and invest in them. So they're really going through a financing through their Exim Bank, Export-Import Bank, and the DFC organization, and so on. And so this whole of government effort, because they see this as a national security threat that needs to be countered. I'm curious, as a private sector operator, when you see the U.S. government, which had historically been laissez-faire in this area, suddenly take a very active interest, including government stakes, and suddenly becoming one of our sources described the White House and the team that's working on this as basically like an investment bank. I mean, the number of meetings they're having, the number of sort of money, the amount of money that they're ready to put out. It has the energy of a high-end Wall Street bank. How do you see that? Do you see this as a welcome development, or do you have some trepidation about this? What role is the U.S. going to play in your industry?
In a couple of sentences or less.
Yes, exactly.
Look, I think what we're seeing is everything that you described, and I think excitingly, I mean, obviously it is exciting, but when I look at it, I think one of the exciting things is the catalytic role this engagement is playing, not just in the mining activity itself, but the infrastructure and the ecosystem around it. What we've seen, we've been operating in Africa for decades, and we've seen, prosperity immediately around the mine. We've seen it accrue to mining-related businesses. We've seen employees, of course, benefit. We've seen some of that cascade to the communities through the work that that my colleagues do on the ground. But what we have not seen is that kind of rising tide, rising the broader regional welfare. What we're seeing now with the U.S. kind of really invigorating this conversation is a much bigger focus on the full infrastructure and system story. So we're seeing investment in Lobito Corridor. Mm-hmm. We're seeing the conversation about various ports being built out in Africa. And that infrastructure is key to mining, and you can dig all the stuff out of the ground, but if you can't get it to your customer, it's just going to sit there. But it's also, I think, key to catalyzing and addressing those broader systemic social challenges that mining alone has struggled to address. We cannot, from our minds, solve for poverty, but actors brought in by the US as an anchor, the infrastructure participants, the enterprise that stems from that infrastructure, that is what will hopefully we'll see starting to lift that broader tide.
I see. So the perspective you have on this is that this kind of renewed involvement by the U.S. in this forceful way may have spillover effects that will be beneficial to the communities in a way that private sector action alone cannot.
Absolutely.
Well, let's see. Let's see if that's what happens. But in terms of the sustainability dimension, which is what we're here to talk about, and of course you are Chief Sustainability Officer at your firm, do you see that the active and more enthusiastic engagement of the U.S. Will have any sustainability impact? Again, historically, China has been the major force in this area and is not, and again, I say this as a former bureau chief for The Economist in China, and a great fan of many innovative aspects of Chinese business. The mining companies in Africa and Latin America are not known for their sustainability accomplishments. I think I can put it delicately. Do you think the arrival of the U.S. in a big way will change that picture, or is this really, again, a new kind of resource-focused investment that may not be any more sustainable than what we've seen in the past?
Look, I think what we are already seeing, and of course, we can't predict the future. We can talk about what we see today, right now. What we see today, right now, is the US, and just to put it really bluntly, the US does not want child labor in its supply chains. There's regulation around forced labor. You can argue about the politics of it, but the fundamentals remain that there are basic things that the US administration, wherever you are on the spectrum, simply does not want in those supply chains. So when they're looking at partnerships on the ground, when they're thinking about their strategy on the ground, it's not at all costs. It's not, whatever, just go for it, go faster. It is very much pragmatic, but that responsible, that fundamentally responsible approach. And so again, I think we see that trickle down of those expectations, whether regulatory or consumer-based, impacting the practice on the ground. It's early days, so I don't want to make any great claims or promises or,
Right.
yes, this is the rosy future that is barreling ahead at us. I can just comment on what we're seeing today, and the conversations that we're certainly having are, how do we deliver what is needed to support security of supply for the US, for AI, for any industry, but how do we do it in a way that addresses the sort of the fundamental sustainability frameworks?
Do we have any questions for Anna? Please put your hands up if you want to ask a question. We have a few minutes. I see a hand here. Let's get a microphone. Again, as always, please identify yourself.
Hi, thank you. I'm Tim from the Carbon Trust, and just wanting to know about the role of sort of secondary metals and potentially using AI for traceability throughout the metal's life, and what that might mean for Glencore's strategy and sustainability.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think those are two questions, or at least I'll treat them as two questions, if that's okay. Secondary metals, yes. No, yeah, of course, it's a no-brainer. We need recycling. We need to improve recovery rates. We need to get better at it. We need more of it. I would say two things about it. One, recycling does not replace new metal. We need both. Two, what we see, and just speaking from our experience, I don't want to generalize, but the permitting and regulatory infrastructure around recycling today is challenging. It's inconsistent. It's not very coherent. The classification of recycled material as hazardous waste by certain jurisdictions, as an example, results in extraordinary delays and complexity in getting the recycled material from point A to point B. So yes, recycling, yes, we need more, but I think there's a significant bottleneck in terms of how effective and efficient the regulatory framework is, whether in individual countries or regions or globally. So I think that's one. I'm going to take that as one question. The second question on traceability. Look, maybe we have my view is slightly unorthodox. Traceability is like email. It doesn't solve the problem. It's a way to get information from one person to another. Yes, it's incredibly important, but I worry that there's so much hype and excitement and focus around traceability that it becomes seen as the kind of answer to all things. And in a world of limited resources, in spite of the limitless possibilities apparently offered to us by AI, my concern is that by focusing on that traceability journey, we lose sight of how do we actually get stuck into solving some of the problems that we face on the ground.
Just say a little bit more about that. What's the? I'm not understanding what the problem is with traceability. Be more explicit.
There's no problem in traceability. It just doesn't solve all. It doesn't solve all problems. So if I think about, we, the collective we as the industry, but also other stakeholders, need to tackle problems on the ground like child labor, like poverty, like governance, like poor environmental management.
You're not against
practices.
traceability. You're just saying it's a tool.
Traceability is a tool to help us keep track. Is it being done? Is it being done well? Are the right people being involved? But traceability itself is not going to fix child labor. Work on the ground will.
Right. And just, I guess, one first principles question. There are those who worry that there's an inadequacy of minerals, of rare earths, and so on for the AI revolution to proceed. Others argue, not just because of recycling, as was pointed out, but generally speaking, that because of innovation, substitution, the scarcity effects, that the marketplace will find solutions, including by driving efficiency in the use of them. We see tremendous progress, obviously, with chips and the making of the AI, as it were, including substitution of materials. Which camp are you in?
Well, as a mining company, of course, we believe in the metal story. But maybe just to flesh that out, whatever the level of innovation, the infrastructure story will stay a physical story. And so the questions of security, perhaps not scarcity, but security and resilience will remain no matter the innovation. I don't want to forecast or look in the future. I think today more than ever, we're aware of just how challenging an exercise that is. But Innovation will happen. Innovation will help us achieve efficiency gains, but will it offset the increase in demand if it is to be as transformational and exponential as some people say it is? I don't know, but I think it's for the foreseeable future that metal demand will remain. And while we do see some substitution, we see the level of demand for different battery chemistries, for different for the power solutions. We see that grow so significantly that the innovation plays a part, but doesn't completely solve it.
So I'm going to put you firmly in the Jevons camp of rebound and utilization. But having said that, you certainly made a powerful point today that we are not yet in a dematerialized world. No matter what advocates of AI will have you think, we very much need the physical world in order to enable the vision of whether it's AI or whatever technologies come next, quantum and so on. So we thank you for what you're doing. Keep digging. Thanks,
Thank
Anna.
you.
Give her a nice round of applause.
Cheers.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.